My name is Aidan Kells. 3 years ago, I was a police officer in Dublin. Now, I'm just a man nearing 30, living in a damp rented house in Dunvarock, a seaside town so small that if you drive a little too fast, you might pass straight through it without realising you've already left. I thought I'd put distance between myself and blood, crime scenes, courtrooms, doctored reports, and heavy envelopes. I thought that here, between the wind and the waves, life would finally be quiet. I was wrong. Dunvarock feels like a place time forgot. The sea is always grey, the sky always looks dusted with ash. The wind carries salt, seaweed and a cold that slips into your bones. In the daytime, people move slowly and talk quietly. At night, the town is so silent you can hear the old church clock ticking like knuckles on a coffin lid. There is one thing people here don't speak of loudly. They only whisper it or look away when it's mentioned. Deaths that happen on Fridays. I heard about it for the first time in the only pub in town. It was a drizzly night. I was sitting alone with a weak beer when the owner, slightly hunched, voice worn out by cigarettes, watched me for a while and then said, "In Dunvarock, don't wander around at noon on Fridays, and whatever you do, don't die that day. Dying here on a Friday isn't like dying anywhere else." I laughed, thinking he was trying to spook the newcomer. But the others in the pub all looked up at me at the same time. No one laughed. One man crossed himself. An old woman muttered something, and in that mumbling, I clearly caught 3 words: the Weeping Bride. ATA. I know a few Celtic legends about ghost brides and wronged spirits, but I never believed them. I'd seen too many real bodies, accidents, stabbings, suicides, to know that most deaths are just the result of stupidity, bad luck, or cruelty. If there are demons, they're probably too busy to stage plays for us. Until one Friday noon, I was dragged on stage myself. That morning, around 9, Maeve knocked on my door. Maeve was my childhood friend. When we were kids, we ran along this coastline, climbed rocks and sat there counting ships. When we grew up, we went our separate ways. I moved to the city and put on a uniform. She stayed, became a nurse at the small town clinic. When we met again, her eyes were still the same clear blue, but there were dark rings under them, like she'd spent too many nights awake with too many things she couldn't say. "Come out to the cliffs with me?" she asked, trying to smile like everything was normal. "I've got the night shift tonight. I want some air before I lock myself in." I had no real reason to refuse. Since I quit the force and came back here, my days were nothing but cleaning, sleeping, drinking, and staring at old case files I no longer had the courage to open. I nodded. "Sure. If we go early, we'll be back soon. I could use fresh air too." Maeve hesitated for a beat, then added, "Lottie's at my place. I promised to take her along. Finn's free as well, he begged to come. Let's call it a tiny weekend trip." Finn is an 18-year-old kid who rides a rattling motorbike around town and tells ghost stories about Dunvarock to anyone who will listen. Lottie is about 11, quiet, with messy curls and big brown eyes that usually stare into the distance instead of at people. I'd seen her at the clinic, sitting completely still during injections, not crying, not flinching, as if listening to some sound no adult could hear. We left a little after 10. Maeve drove, I sat in the front, Finn and Lottie in the back. The coastal road was familiar. Cliffs on one side, the grey sea on the other. The sky was brighter than usual, but the road was still damp, and a thin mist hung over it like a faded curtain. Finn leaned back and said, half joking, half serious, "Hey, do you believe in the curses around here, Aidan? I believe in working breaks, good tires, and not drinking before driving," I said, eyes on the road. "As for curses, depends on the day." "I'm being serious," Finn insisted. "You've heard it, right? If someone dies on a Friday, they come back right away. They can't die again until Monday, but they feel everything. The whole town avoids that day like the plague." Maeve's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Finn, stop it." "I'm just asking," he muttered, but his voice dropped. I turned toward Lottie, trying to lighten the mood. "What about you? Do you believe it?" She turned her head and looked straight at me. There was something too old in those brown eyes. She spoke slowly, in a steady tone. "Here, the people who die on Fridays often come back over the weekend. You already know what it feels like to be pulled back, don't you, Uncle?" Her words made something cold run through me. They hit exactly where I'd buried everything. A flash. A girl on a wet Dublin pavement. Blood spreading across the asphalt. A drunk driver begging me for help. The report I altered. The death that should have been called a crime. Lottie says weird things. Maeve cut in quickly. She probably overheard adults and is copying them. But her voice wasn't convincing. And Lottie's didn't sound like she was copying anyone. Around 11:40, the fog suddenly thickened. 1 second, the road was still clear. The next, there was a solid wall of white in front of us. The headlights shone into it and bounced straight back, blinding. "For fuck's sake," Maeve muttered, slowing down. "I can't see anything." Wind from the sea buffeted the windshield, carrying a damp sound with it, like someone crying with a hand clamped over their mouth. My skin prickled. "Pull over," I said. "Get off the road, wait for the fog to clear, then go. I don't want to be stuck out here exactly at noon." Maeve shook her head, her voice tense. "You don't get it, Aidan. I'm not joking about this." "You really believe it?" I asked, surprised. "Did you forget what I do for a living?" she said quietly. "I'm a nurse. I've seen people die on Mondays, Tuesdays, every day. Only the ones who die on Fridays are different. I'll tell you later. Right now, we just avoid it." I was about to argue when it happened. A white shape appeared right in front of the car, stepping out of the fog. No face, only a long white dress, whipping in the wind and loose hair. Maeve jolted, swerved. The tires slipped on the wet asphalt. The car spun, lurched, and lost all control. For a fraction of a second, I saw the grey water below open up like a giant mouth. Then we were falling. Metal crashed, glass shattered, bones cracked. Then everything went black. I thought I was dead. The feeling of your neck breaking, that sharp crack at the base of the skull, is something you don't mistake. My body twisted at an angle you don't see in any anatomy book. No light, no sound, just a dense void. Then sound seeped back in. Water dripping somewhere, the smell of gasoline, blood and burnt plastic. Groans, ragged coughing, the creak of metal. Pain hit like a tide. My neck was still broken, I knew it. Every tiny movement made the vertebrae grate and sent knives of pain through my skull. But my heart didn't stop. My lungs kept dragging the fuel-tainted air in. "Maeve!" I rasped. "Finn! Lottie!" Maeve was slumped across the steering wheel, a metal rod from the dashboard driven through her abdomen. Her shirt was soaked. She lifted her head slightly, eyes wide, breath coming in shallow bursts. I'm not dead yet." Finn had been thrown forward, half of him hanging out of the broken doorframe, his head a mess of blood, one arm bent the wrong way. He panted, then let out a broken laugh between coughs, my heart still beating. "You hear that? And I can't fucking move." "Where's Lottie?" Maeve gasped. The girl lay wedged between the 2 rows of seats, hair matted with blood, skin paper white. Her chest wasn't moving. She looked exactly like every body I'd ever seen on a slab. I was crawling toward her when her eyelids twitched. Then she slowly opened her eyes. She didn't jerk awake. She looked up as if something old was moving back into place. Her gaze was darker, deeper than usual. "Don't try to stand," she said calmly. "You'll just break more bones." The church bells began to toll somewhere far above, their sound carrying through fog and rock. 1 chime, 2, all the way to 12. Friday noon. We had died before then, and now, like the people in the pub had said, we were still here. Maeve looked down at the wound in her stomach, her fingers shaking. The blood kept coming, but she didn't pass out. She didn't slide toward that final dark. She just hurt so much that her face twisted with every breath. "I should be dead," she whispered. "But I'm still awake. I'm being kept." "It's the curse," Finn said hoarsely, lips splitting further with each word. "We're stuck in the Friday death loop." A different kind of cold settled in my chest. I no longer thought this was a campfire story. The car door swung open on its own. Wind roared in, dragging clumps of fog. On the cliff above, the shapes of a few villagers materialized. Old faces, an old man with a cane, a woman with her hand at her mouth. They stood there, looking down, but no one ran to help. The old man cupped his hands around his mouth and called down, voice shaking, "You shouldn't have been on the road at this hour, children." A woman wiped her eyes but stayed where she was. "Run, if you can still run. This weekend doesn't belong to you anymore." The way she said, "this weekend," sent a shiver up my spine. The fog in front of us thickened again, swirling, gathering into a mass, then stretching out into thin arms. A woman's sobbing rose from every direction at once. Those mist arms lunged down, wrapping around our throats, chests, limbs. They didn't feel like skin. They weren't cold or warm, just brutally tight. My skin burned and then split open. Blood sprayed. The pain was like being sliced by countless wires. But even as my neck felt like it snapped again, my heart didn't stop. "Get out!" I yelled. "Out of the car! Move!" Maeve bit down on a scream and forced herself up, dragging Lottie with her. Every shift of her body made the metal rod scrape bone with a sound I'll never forget. Finn scrambled after them. The mist arms clawed strips of flesh from his back. He screamed until his voice broke and kept breathing. We pulled ourselves out of the wreck and started climbing. Fingers digging into the wet rock, the things in the fog clung to our legs, our faces, trying to tear us apart and keep us conscious for every second of it. By the time we reached the top, the bells were finishing their 12th chime. The pale sun was high, but no one felt any warmer. The villagers took a step back as we crawled over the edge. They watched us like they were watching something that had dragged itself out of a grave. Fear in their eyes, but pity as well. None of them reached out. "They're trapped in the bride's weekend," someone whispered. I clung to the rock, lungs burning. "The bride? Who is she?" Maeve's face was bloodless, her lips turning blue, but her voice was steady. "Long ago, there was a girl here. On her wedding day, her groom never showed up. She ran to this cliff in her wedding dress and waited. Some people saw her from afar, but no one went close because they were afraid of gossip. She stood here until noon. When she understood she'd been left, she slipped and fell. That was Friday noon. She didn't die immediately. All weekend she lay wedged between the rocks below, bones broken, flesh torn, seawater filling her lungs, and she couldn't die. On Monday morning, when her body had come apart completely, she disappeared. After that, anyone who dies on a Friday morning is pulled into her weekend. Finn let out a cracked laugh. "So we can't die until Monday, but the world gets to rip us apart in the meantime." "Perfect." "It's not perfect," Lottie said quietly. "It's a reminder for the ones who left her. A punishment stretched out. She wants someone to stand exactly where she stood." "How do you know that?" I asked her. "She told me," Lottie replied. "The bride. She's in my head. She says, 'You once watched someone die and turned away.'" My heart spasmed. The thing I'd called professional error suddenly looked uglier than that. "Go to the church," the old man from the cliff said, his voice heavy. "It's the only shelter left. This weekend will be long." The stone church sat on a small rise. Its heavy wooden door groaned when we pushed it open. Inside, it was cold and dim, incense and damp stone hanging in the air. Our footsteps echoed along the nave like knocks on a coffin lid. I dropped onto the nearest pew, one hand pressed to my neck. The gash was deep, my shirt soaked, but I wasn't dizzy. My vision stayed clear. The pain was just there, stubborn and steady. "I told you," Maeve said, sinking down beside me, still clutching the metal rod in her stomach. "People who die on Fridays don't get to leave right away. They get dragged back here to remember, to pay, and to do something else I still don't understand." Finn leaned against the wall, head tipped back. "Last year, there was a drunk who fell off the bridge into the river. He was dead when they pulled him out. At noon, he sat up and started coughing out water. The whole town panicked. They tried to kill him again. Slit his throat, stabbed his chest, held him under. He wouldn't die. All weekend, he wandered around the village, laughing, sobbing, picking fights. Monday morning, his wounds closed on their own. He looked normal. That night, he vanished. All they found were his clothes hanging on the church gate. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing." "Why did he vanish?" I asked. "Because he'd been torn up too badly," Finn said. "His body wasn't intact enough for his soul to come back. Around here we call that not being reset properly." "And if the body holds together until Monday?" I asked. "Then you get reset properly," he replied. "The system drops you back into your spot. You go on living in the same body, but with an extra shadow hanging off your back." Wind whistled through the stone cracks, making the candle flames tremble and go out. Shadows stretched and warped on the floor. Lottie stood in the aisle, staring up at a mural on the ceiling. A bride in white on the cliff edge, stormy sea behind her. The face had faded, but the loneliness in her stance was still clear. "She's been up there for a long time," Lottie murmured. "Year after year, always the same Friday moment. She sees everyone who dies that day, sees them crawl up, run, scream. She hears them all. But she can't leave her own fall." "How do you know?" I asked. "She says it in my head," Lottie answered. "She says you once stood over a death and chose to walk away because you thought, if I help, it's trouble. If I don't, everything's easier. She doesn't care who you were on paper. To her, you're just the one who watched." I said nothing. Every excuse I'd used on myself felt cheap now. Friday night passed in a haze of groans outside the door, dragging footsteps, fingernails on wood. Sometimes something knocked gently, 3 even taps. Then a warped voice would whisper from the other side, "Let us in. The weekend is so long. It's lonely out here." We stayed in the church until almost dawn. But Lottie said hiding wouldn't save us, because that weekend wasn't a place. It was something that clung. Saturday was one long flight. We stumbled through the cemetery, where the smell of damp earth and moss mixed together. The morning shadows slid between gravestones and wrapped around our ankles, yanking hard. Every time one latched on, a patch of skin tore away. I never knew a person could be peeled like that and remain conscious. Finn tripped and went down head first. One misty shape dropped over his head and clamped tight. I heard the crack in his skull, felt my stomach twist. Skin split, blood streamed over his face. He screamed, "Just smash my head in, please. I can't take this." "I can't." Maeve grabbed my arm. "If we do, he won't have anything left to come back to on Monday. Is Inton and so we just let him suffer?" I shouted. "The ones who vanish have it worse," she said, eyes shining. "I've seen their families weep without a body to bury. No grave, no name, nothing. I don't want Finn to become another ghost like that." All we could do was drag him onward, every step a bargain with pain. Lottie led us, steering clear of places, she said. Too many people died. I didn't ask how she knew. I was afraid of the answer. Saturday night, we reached the sea cave, where children said the bride had been thrown down. The tide had gone out, exposing slimy rocks. Waves hammered the cliff like funeral drums. "This is where she spent her first weekend," Lottie said. "No one searched, no one called, no one cried, just wind and water." I stood on the headland and looked down into the black water. Dizziness surged. It was far too easy to imagine a white body wedged among the stones, eyes wide open, mouth full of seawater. "Someone stood up here and watched that day," Lottie went on. "Did nothing, didn't call anyone, didn't reach out a hand." "Why?" I asked, though I knew, because they thought, "It's not my problem. Helping would cause trouble," she said, turning to meet my eyes. "In this life, you're a cop. You stood there and chose to sign a report instead of helping someone. To her, you're the one who watched. The guilt I'd tried to file under work pressure had teeth now," she says. Lottie lowered her voice. "If someone is willing to stand where she stood, to fall, to be trapped in that weekend forever, she'll be free. But that person has to understand what it means to leave someone behind." "I know," Finn gasped. "I don't want to stay here forever. I don't even know what I want from life yet. But I know it's not being some wedding ghost." "Me neither," I said honestly. I'm not brave enough to volunteer. If no one does, then on Monday all of us might vanish, Maeve said. The curse doesn't care about logic. It cares about some kind of balance only it understands. We staggered through another day of being chased, clawed and dragged under. My body hurt so much it felt like I'd been boiled down to nothing but nerves. Sunday night, we went back to the church. The door stood open. Inside, it was pitch black. As my eyes adjusted, I saw shapes standing between the pews. Pale outlines without faces or age, silent, like smoke that had decided to stand still. Don't look too closely, Maeve whispered. Those are the ones who weren't reset. No bodies to return to, not light enough to move on, stuck between Friday and Monday. We collapsed onto a pew. Outside, the wind howled. The sky felt like a bottomless hole. Time didn't seem to move, or if it did, it wasn't in seconds and minutes. A few hours before dawn, Lottie suddenly dropped to her knees in the aisle, clutching her head. She screamed. It wasn't a child's scream. It was the scream of a woman whose throat had been torn raw. She raised her head. Her eyes were completely white. When she opened her mouth, a different voice came out. Lower, echoing, heavy with damp stone. "I've had enough," that voice said. Years on top of years, so many Fridays, so many weekends. I lay in the rocks and listened to the sea, listened to people above laughing and talking. No one called my name. I watched those who were saved, those who were mourned, those who were buried properly. And me, no one remembered. I went nowhere. It's time to trade places. Maeve, hands shaking, still knelt in front of her. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "I want someone to stand where I stood," the voice answered. "Someone who knows how it feels to be abandoned. Someone who once turned away from the dying. That person will stay. I will go." The wide eyes turned to me. Even without pupils, I could feel the weight of that stare. "You," she said, "you stood beside a death and chose silence. You took money to bury justice. You know how to use paper to bury a person. You're chosen." I swallowed hard. My whole body shook. Her words felt like they'd been taken straight out of my chest. "I can't turn back time," I said, my throat dry. "If you need someone to stay, then taking me makes sense. But I'm not brave enough to say I'm ready to stay here forever. I won't lie about that." "Just like always," the bride's voice snapped. "When there's time, you say I can't help. When you're cornered, you say I'm not brave enough. What you do best is watch." The air grew heavier. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. "If it's only one person," Finn muttered. "That means if one of us stays, the other 3 get to live, right?" "Yes," the voice said instantly. "I don't need more. 1 is enough." Silence dropped. I looked at Finn. He looked back. We were both drained. The idea of just ending had its own twisted appeal. Finn opened his mouth. "Then no." Maeve stood up. "Not you, not Aidan. I'll go." We both turned to her. "Are you insane?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "No, you don't owe her anything. I'm the one who's guilty. I owe plenty," Maeve said calmly, meeting my eyes. "I've watched too many people die on Fridays with nothing I could do but stand there. I knew about this curse and still lived with it. I kept my mouth shut. I knew and didn't warn you clearly enough. If I hadn't asked you to come, if I'd forced you to stay home today, maybe you wouldn't be in this. I was driving. I brought all three of you up there. If someone has to stay, it should be me. I won't allow it, I said, gripping her shoulders. I'm the coward. It should be me. And your mother? She asked softly. Who takes her to the doctor? Who brings her medicine? Who listens to her talk for an hour so she won't be lonely? She only has you. My mother is gone. I don't have anyone. My patients. There will always be another nurse. Dunvarock needs someone who knows the curse, understands the law, and is afraid in the right way. That person is you. You're more useful than a tired nurse. She turned to Lottie. Tell her, Maeve said. Tell the bride I accept the trade. But she has to reset Aidan, Finn and Lottie properly tomorrow morning. Lottie sobbed, but the bride's voice pushed through her crying. One bride for another. I accept. To the cliff, where I fell. You will fall there too. I'm not letting you go alone, I said, clinging to the last scraps of my courage. If you fall, don't repeat your mistake. Maeve cut me off, smiling through her tears. Once, you stood and watched someone die without reaching out. This time, you have to stand still and let someone go without grabbing them. If you ruin the bargain, all of us are finished. Her words felt like a sentence, but also like the only way out. We followed her up the hill and stopped. She went on alone toward the cliff edge. Her figure was small against the grey sky. The wind whipped her clothes and hair. From where we stood, she looked exactly like the bride in the church mural. White, between rock and sea. Maeve! I shouted. Come back! She stopped, turned and smiled. A tired smile, but so gentle that for a moment the screaming in my head went silent. Tell my story properly, she called. Don't let me be just that Friday death. Watch over Lottie for me. Keep Finn out of trouble. And drink a bit less, Aidan. Your neck's fragile enough. She turned again, walked the last few steps to the edge, spread her arms as if embracing someone invisible, and stepped into the empty air. Her body vanished from sight. There was no sickening crash, no bone-breaking sound, no long scream. Just a gust of wind rising from below, carrying for the first time all weekend the clean smell of the sea without rot. Lottie crumpled to the ground, sobbing into her hands. Finn clenched his fists, eyes red, silent. I stood frozen, fingers digging into the stone rail, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and pulled something out. From deep below, a long, heavy scream rose, hoarse and cracked, like a rope that had been pulled too tight, finally snapping. It wasn't Maeve. It was the sound of a grudge that had lasted far too long breaking loose. When the first blade of dawn cut across the sky, shredding the fog that had wrapped Dunvarock for 3 days, I felt my body convulse. The wounds on my neck, arms and legs started to close. Bones ached fiercely, then slid back into place. I fell onto the grass, gasping like a drowning man who'd broken the surface at last. Finn pushed himself up and touched his face. The deep cuts had become fresh pink scars. He laughed, ragged. We actually made it? Lottie lay on the grass, her chest rising and falling. Her eyes were brown again, no longer blank. She sat up, her voice hoarse. "The bride is gone." "But there's still someone on that cliff." "Maeve," I said. "I didn't need to ask." Lottie nodded. She says, "You shouldn't be out at noon on Fridays anymore. The curse is much weaker now, but she doesn't want you to test it." When we walked back into town, people lined the narrow street and watched us. No one clapped, no one cheered. They just nodded, as if acknowledging that a debt had been paid. The next day, they gathered outside the clinic, leaving flowers along the steps and windowsills. For years, Maeve had quietly cared for half the town without asking for anything. Now they spoke her name with a respect she had never been given in life. Late, but not too late for her memory. I went home and slept dreamlessly. When I woke, my neck still ached, but it wasn't the tearing pain from before. In the bathroom mirror, I saw a long scar running across my throat, a pale pink line like a seam someone had stitched closed. That evening, I went to the clinic to find Lottie. She was sitting on the steps with a book in her lap, staring up at the hill. "Do you still hear anyone in your head?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "Not like before," she replied. "The bride is gone. There's someone else on the cliff now. She doesn't cry, she just watches the town. Sometimes she laughs and tells us not to be stupid." "Did she say anything about me?" I asked. Lottie nodded. She said, "You should tell this story to people who are afraid of the curse, so they know someone went ahead to clear the way for them. And if anyone ever thinks of turning their back on someone who needs saving, tell them to remember this weekend." Later that night, back at my house, I was about to lie down when I heard 3 soft knocks on the door. I went to open it. Outside, there was only wind, the smell of salt, the sound of waves. No one was there. I closed the door and turned back down the hallway and heard her voice, very close, very clear, not echoing in my skull, but sounding like it came from right behind me. "Aidan, this Friday, stay home. Make 2 cups of tea. Drink 1, leave the other across from you. And don't let any more brides die alone." I spun around. In the mirror at the end of the hall, I saw my own reflection. And behind me, another figure, a young woman in a simple white blouse, hair tied back, blue eyes, smiling. No wedding dress, no fog, no rage, just Maeve, exactly as she looked on an ordinary day. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, the mirror showed only me, but the faint scent of clinic incense lingered in the air. Since then, every Friday at noon, I stay off the streets. I make 2 cups of tea, set one in front of the empty chair opposite me, and sit in my damp little house that somehow feels less cold. I talk about the cases I used to handle, about the girl in Dublin, about the report I altered, about the decision that pushed me out of the uniform. I talk about that horrible weekend, about Finn, about Lottie, about the Weeping Bride, about Maeve. In Dunvarock, people still avoid Fridays. But when they tell stories to their children now, the legend of the Weeping Bride is no longer alone. There is another name they add, Maeve, the nurse who chose to step off the cliff so others could be reset properly on Monday morning. And if one Friday at noon you stand on the hill and look out toward the sea, you might see a slim white shape on the cliff edge, no longer crying, just quietly watching the town. Not to curse it, but to keep watch, to remind people like me that sometimes the scariest thing isn't death itself, but leaving someone to die alone.